So, when it comes to making a movie, if you're going to kill off a character, then chances are you should probably make sure you show that death happening. You know, the classic show, don't tell. Unfortunately, a lot of directors tend to forget that age-old adage and opt to simply talk about a character dying rather than actually demonstrate the grisly business on screen. Now, sometimes death will occur away from the camera lens in order to surprise the audience or help them relate to another character in the film. That's fine. For example, one character might happen upon the dead body of their friend and then freak out. And because we as the audience didn't witness the death either, we can freak out right along with them. But the examples we're looking at today, well, they weren't that. In fact, some of them were actually quite petty, so let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 incredibly important movie characters who were killed off screen. Number 9. The Kraken, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. The most impressive and imposing of all the creatures in the seemingly never-ending Pirates franchise, Davy Jones's beastly pet monster provides the most exciting moments in the second installment of the series, Dead Man's Chest. Now say what you will about the rest of the film, but the Kraken was epic. And since we see the creature dragging Captain Jack Sparrow down to the depths of the ocean and into Davy Jones's locker, one would safely assume that Jack would get a chance at revenge in the next movie. But he doesn't. Instead, we're treated to an ultra-brief scene where Sparrow and Barbosa encounter the dead carcass of the Kraken on the beach. Jones himself had to put down the monster under the orders of Lord Cutler Beckett, but we never get to see this death. Now granted, the discovery of the deceased beast leads to a nice heart-to-heart between Captain Sparrow and Barbosa about mortality, but that scene would have played just as well had we gotten to witness the bloody demise. Number 8. Tank, The Matrix Reloaded. Now, the first Matrix film is pretty much a bloodbath for the human characters. Basically, anyone who stepped foot onto the Nebuchadnezzar was dead before the ending credits rolled. The second coming of Judah, Cypher goes ahead and kills off most of the other crew members, including APOC, Switch, Dozer, and Mouse, before being executed himself, leaving only the good guys to make it out of the first movie alive, in the form of Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, and of course, Tank. And yet, one of those 4 characters never made it to the sequel. Rather, a throwaway line in The Matrix Reloaded tells us that Tank died. The how and why is never actually fleshed out, and his duties have been given to his brother-in-law, Link. It's a thoughtless swap-out that makes the mid-series recasting of Becky on the sitcom of Roseanne look seamless and inspired by comparison. Did they really think that no one would care that Tank was killed off and then substituted with someone else? But you know what, we can't actually blame production fully here, because this was a case of real-life meddling, screwing up the on-screen interpretation. As it turns out, the guy who played Tank in the first Matrix, Marcus Chong, got a little bit too big for his britches and demanded the same salary as Lawrence Fishburne for the sequel. The Wachowskis responded by showing him just how replaceable he was. Number 7. Xander Cage, XXX State of the Union. James Bond on a skateboard, Extreme 007, GoldenEye with a new metal soundtrack. However you want to label it, Vin Diesel's attempt to create a spy thriller franchise pretty much fizzled out, even after the first XXX did actually put up Fast and Furious numbers at the box office. Now most of that is due to Diesel's reluctance to get on board with the sequel because he felt the script didn't feel XXX. But that didn't stop the studio from performing the ever-popular switcheroo, tossing Ice Cube into the role for the next film. Rather than call the movie something else entirely, however, they opted to stick with the XXX branding, which meant that they had to explain to audiences why Xander Cage was suddenly missing from the scene, and they did this by A. killing off Diesel's character via off-screen explosion, and B. retconning the core concept of the bloody movie, claiming that XXX is simply a code name for any secret agent hired by the NSA, despite the fact that Xander Cage called himself XXX before he was ever hired by the government agency. Anyhow, literally blowing up Cage was a terrible idea and meant that when we got the, let's just call it a film, Return of Xander Cage, which came out in 2017, we had to do quite a lot of retconning. Great. Number 6. Doughboy, Boys in the Hood. Now, let's face facts, John Singleton's directorial debut, Boys in the Hood, was a bit of a bummer to say the least. Depicting the less than ideal life of those unfortunate enough to live in South Central Los Angeles, Boys in the Hood leaves no stone unturned in relating to just how depressing life for young, disadvantaged black men can be. And holy crap, does Singleton do a good job of it. By the end of the film, death feels like an inevitability for these kids. Try as hard as they might to avoid gang life and walk the straight and narrow in this rough neighborhood, eventually they will be forced into a situation that puts them on the Grim Reaper's doorstep. That's what makes Ice Cube's character Doughboy such an integral part of the story. He fully embraces the violent lifestyle, brandishing his handgun to end arguments and refusing to back down from confrontation. So it's a solid gut punch when Doughboy's brother Ricky, the fun-loving football player with a college scholarship, is the one gunned down in the film's final act. Doughboy gets retribution for his brother's demise, killing the 3 guys responsible for the drive-by in rather brutal fashion, action, but just to prove that the cycle of gang violence is unending, Singleton makes sure to let us know because in the epilogue, Doughboy was murdered 2 weeks later. In a rare instance of an off-screen death proving rather effective, his death manages to hit hard even as just a caption. Number 5. Sarah Connor, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Talk about character development here. Sarah Connor goes from a vulnerable damsel in distress in the original to a certified badass militant heroine in the sequel. And thanks to this, the character quickly stole the show from the Terminator as Linda Hamilton revolutionized the role of females in action movies. But when the franchise began to hit the skids, it was no coincidence that Sarah Connor was nowhere to be found. The shift of focus from the protective mother to her son John may have been a natural progression, but the jarring manner in which it occurred during the third film couldn't have been more stilted. In Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, the audience is told that sometime between the second and third film, Sarah succumbed to leukemia. Now, the way she died wasn't the biggest issue, although it certainly felt a little cheap. The issue was the fact that it was just so callously glossed over. That really stung. Behind the scenes, this was because Hamilton chose not to reprise her role again, as she felt her character's story had already been wrapped up. Still, that didn't stop her from returning to the series later on in a less than amazing outcome. Number 4. Newt, Hicks, and Bishop, Alien 3. What is it about the third movie in a franchise that brings out the necessity for off-screen deaths? And actually, it's from another James Cameron franchise nonetheless. On a cinematic level, the sudden, very undramatic deaths of Ripley's surrogate family, Marine leader Hicks, the traumatized young girl Newt, and android Bishop were probably necessary to move the story forward. I mean, after all, David Fincher's brutally dismal world as portrayed in Alien 3 wouldn't have allowed for a happy ragtag family story. Still, the impact of their loss was pretty much nullified by the fact that we don't even see their faces for a single frame. It's heartbreaking to see the news of their deaths delivered to Ripley, but it would have been 10 times more powerful had they made it past the opening credits and we were allowed to witness their deaths firsthand. But it seems we have more behind-the-scenes shenanigans to thank for this, since the production of Alien 3 was pretty much a disaster from start to finish, with multiple scripts being mashed together even at the last second. Ultimately, these three characters, who were all vital to the story in Aliens, were chopped out of the film to make it easier on everyone else involved. Number 3. Llewellyn Moss, No Country for Old Men. Damn it, Coen brothers, you earned so much goodwill from fans with Raising Arizona and Fargo that you just had to go and see how far you could stretch it, didn't you? We all know that Joel and Ethan Coen can write a great death scene, but with No Country for Old Men, they also proved that they could write a very frustrating one as well. Now, Josh Brolin's character, Llewellyn, is a Vietnam vet who looked to outsmart the sociopathic hitman Anton, sent to track him down for stealing money after coming across a drug deal gone awry. Now, Brolin's character is the one shining ray of hope in this rather bleak movie, the only one the audience can really root for. All we want to do is see a final confrontation between him and Anton, hopefully with Moss coming out on top, but we get none of that. Instead, he's killed off by a seemingly random group of Mexican cartel members. We find out about it just as Tommy Lee Jones's character does, finding him dead on the floor of a hotel room. Suddenly, that hope is gone. Everything is futile once again. Cheers. Number 2. Adrian, Rocky Balboa. In the story of Rocky Balboa, his wife Adrian might just be the most essential part of his journey. Sure, it's Rocky's rotating cast of unique opponents that most people remember, and those characters certainly helped Rocky grow as a competitor, but it's Adrian who did the most to help this guy become an actual human once the gloves were off. Adrian was his motivation to fight Apollo Creed in a rematch. Adrian stood by him when he was on the brink of poverty once again, and Adrian forced him to snap out of it and stop neglecting his son in favor of some random gym rat that he wanted to train. After all of that though, Sylvester Stallone decided that the best way to make Adrian a pivotal character in the long-awaited Rocky VI was to kill her off a few years before the events of that movie took place. Yes, that's right, she was written out between movies, and her death was used as a way to turn Rocky into a grieving, sentimental moralizer. Stallone figured that her death would cut Rocky's heart out and drop him down to ground zero, but apparently he didn't want to waste any actual screen time showing it. Thanks. And number 1, Cyclops, X-Men The Last Stand. Now, even casual fans of X-Men know that along with Wolverine, Cyclops is pretty much the de facto leader of the group and one of the most important characters in the series. So when Scott Summers dies in the third film of the original trilogy, you'd expect it to be an epic, stupefyingly heroic moment. But no, that's not the case. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Cyclops' death is pretty much the least heroic thing we've ever seen, or in fact, we didn't see. Distraught over the apparent death of his fiancée and teammate Jean Grey, Cyclops walks out into a lake where she heroically sacrificed herself at the end of the previous film. There he comes face to face with the suddenly not dead Jean Grey, and the two suck face for a brief, rather passionate moment before Jean goes all Dark Phoenix on him and he starts disintegrating. Cut to Professor X sensing something is amiss and sending Wolverine and Storm to check out on the situation, where they find only Cyclops' glasses. That's it, he's gone, he's dead, bye. But apparently this was another issue of the actor portraying Cyclops, James Marsden, taking a part in Superman Returns, which you might recognise as a competing superhero movie owned by a completely different studio. Basically, his character's cheap death in the first act was a petty retribution for crossing the dividing line between franchises, but we as the audience were the ones paying the price. Thanks. And there we go, my friends. Those were 9 incredibly important movie characters who were killed off screen. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, where I do all of my streaming outside of work, and it'd be great to see you over there. But before I go, just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, my friends, because you are an absolute ledge listening to this video, and you deserve all of the best things in life, alright? Go out there and smash it today. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.